Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to the podcast talking about mental health, the Quran and Islam. So I thought just to talk today generally about the issue of mental health globally. I mean, now they're saying that there's a lot of increase in mental health problems, and this is globally around the world, so it's affecting all people, all types of people, all ages and all walks of life. And there are different reasons given for this increase in mental health problems. But one of the reasons that's given is actually the lack of religion. And I found it interesting because Young, he was one of the people who put forward this idea that religion is something that benefits us, and our mental health, because we need a sense of purpose and we need a sense of guidance. When we don't have this sense of purpose or guidance, we just are going to be lost, and that's not going to be very mentally healthy, is it? Being lost, not knowing what to do with yourself in your life. I remember reading one book by Dale Carney. It was called Stop Worrying, Start Living. I'm sure many people know this book. And this book, it mentioned it talked about many issues, but it talked about some of the opinions of psychologists, and that some psychologists, they actually recommend religion to their clients. And they don't say a specific religion, but they say any religion. Any religion is going to benefit them, because just people need a purpose, and they need to feel that they are belonging, and also that there's someone there for them. And these are the things that religion offers people. So people who are trying to promote atheism and go against religion in general, or to say that Islam is backwards and religion is not true, they're not actually helping the situation of humanity. There's a lot of research now into the benefits of prayer. Prayer sends us into a meditative state. People, they try to replace prayer with meditation, but actually I don't see how meditation will be better than prayer, because in meditation you're just kind of sitting and just going into a calm state and doing nothing. But when you pray, you are actually asking for the things that you need. So wouldn't that be better and more helpful, especially when you actually get those things in the end? Because we've been the experiences of many people that they say that their prayers are answered. And I found it interesting once to watch a documentary on the television that actually atheists at times pray as well when they are in need. According to this documentary, there were people who were interviewed who were atheists, and these atheists, they admitted when they were asked, have you ever prayed? Most of them could remember a time when they had prayed. They'd been so desperate, maybe they felt their life was in danger, or some specific issue happened, and they said they just prayed. And the interviewer asked one woman, he said, what made you pray? You said you are an atheist. She said, I don't know, I just felt to pray. I just raised my hands and I just prayed because there was nothing else to do. So she said it was just something just came in me and I just prayed. And this was not just one person, it was several people. So I found it interesting that atheists, when they need to, they can pray too. And even they will tell you that the thing that they prayed for even was answered sometimes. So prayer is very beneficial, but it's not just only the prayer that benefits us. It's the whole idea of guidance, and there being, I mean, that when you know that there is someone, there's God, there's the Creator, there's Allah, and He's there, and He can answer you and help you in any time. Obviously, this is something that's very comforting to the heart, especially in difficult times. And this is something that we continually remind ourselves when, as Muslims, when we are in difficult situations, and when difficult times happen to us, we remember that Allah is there and He knows what He's doing, and there's a purpose. And the whole idea of purpose, and that things happen for a purpose, is actually very comforting. And I found that was the main thing when I had PTSD, and when I had traumas happen, and when negative things happen. I think it would be very difficult to cope with these things if I knew there was no purpose. Maybe I would go crazy at that time. But when I know that these traumas, these issues, they happen because Allah was guiding me. He was using these traumas for a purpose. So, and they actually have done me good for what I began to see as my purpose in my life. And the things that I thought were traumas and very bad things, they were actually leading me in a certain way. They're telling me to go this way and helping me to understand things. So it's like now, when I look back at the traumas and the things that happen, I'm able to see the patterns, I'm able to see the purpose, and I'm able to understand more that they had purpose and they're leading me to a purpose. And this is something that's comforting and reassuring, that maybe you've gone through hard times and you've gone through bad times, but it's not just for nothing. You're being led to something, and these experiences, even if they are bad, they are transforming us and helping us to develop into something. And this is the function of the religious way of looking at the world. That when these negative things happen, then they are planned, they are purposeful, and the sense of purpose brings us comfort, that we have a purpose and the whole world has a purpose. And the whole idea of purpose is something that people have been asking about in philosophy and in psychology, and in general it's a human question. People want to know their purpose. If people feel they don't have a purpose, it's they will naturally ask, well, why then? Why did it happen? This is a very natural thing to ask. So trying to remove religion, trying to say that atheism is making more sense, is just entirely wrong, because religion is what has been giving us these meanings and purposes, and it's giving us the essence of our life, how to live, and why and how. It gives us the why and the how. And also, the Quran, for example, I was very interested in this verse that the Quran tells us that the Quran is healing for the heart. When I was in a very sad state, I read this verse. I didn't read it, it just came to my mind, and I started to think about how the Quran can heal our hearts. What would be in the Quran that can heal our hearts? Is it reading Quran and listening to the nice sound? Or how is the Quran going to heal the heart? But once I started studying the Quran and studying the meaning of the Quran and the interpretations and the tafsir of the Quran, I began to realize that the Quran itself, a lot of the Quran has something that's healing for people, because, like I said, it's the essence of meaning, giving meaning and purpose, and that our lives are not just in vain, and things don't happen in our lives for no reason. Everything has purpose, and also we don't have to feel we are alone. The Quran reminds us that Allah is there, and He reminds us that He will forgive us and He will give us whatever we want and need if we ask Him. And not just that, but sometimes we can feel that maybe we're the only one who is suffering a certain type of problem, and we may think that it's me, or maybe I'm being punished, or why did this happen to me? Or, we think that it's a really big issue and nobody else is going through something that I am going through, or there's nothing worse than what I am going through. But the Quran teaches us the stories of the prophets and righteous people who went through similar things or worse things that we are going through. So I remember once I entered the mosque to listen to one of the lessons of Quran explanation, and I sat down, and the teacher was just explaining the story of Ayub. And when I start to hear this story, it just came to my mind that this prophet Ayub had so many problems. He was in such a difficult situation, and I suddenly forgot all of my problems. It just seemed that listening to the problems of somebody else when it's worse than you, it's actually, I'm not going to say it's comforting, because we don't want to be comforted by other people's problems, but it's kind of gives you the feeling that you're not alone, and there are people worse than you, so it kind of puts your own situation in perspective. So when I hear this story about Ayub and the story of Yusuf and the things that Maryam went through, they are stories that I often remind myself when I find myself in a situation. For example, Maryam had people falsely accuse her of something she didn't do, and she was entirely pure and clear of what they were saying. So when we find ourselves also accused like that, and we remember these stories, we know that there were worse things that happened to people. And it doesn't, just as she was clear from that, we can be clear from that too. We just have to be patient. So we learn how to deal with these problems and issues from reading these stories, and we can feel that we're not alone. And that was the purpose of these stories being revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam during these times, because the Muslims were going through difficult times in the beginning. They were being persecuted, they were being killed for their religion. We know that there were people martyred like Sumayya, and people who they were killed by the polytheist Quraysh, and there were people driven out of their homes, there were people who lost their families, there were people who had difficult times. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had sad times as well. He also suffered. So these stories and verses and stories of prophets and righteous people, they were all revealed to remind us that other people went through these things. It's kind of normal and can be expected. It's not something that we can really run away from, or we cannot just think that we're the only ones, or that this is a punishment. It's not a punishment, but we are being tested by Allah. And also, these things happened to people before us, and they happened to all kinds of people. And we can learn from them, and we can see what was the end of them, what happened to them. For example, the people of the ditch, they were a people who they believed in one boy, because that boy, he managed to convince people to believe in Allah, because he asked the king or the pharaoh of that time to fire an arrow at him and say Bismillah, because he tried to kill him several times. He couldn't. So the boy told him to say Bismillah. And he said Bismillah, and he killed him. And this made the people believe in him. When the king saw that these people were believing in the boy, he wanted to put them all in a big ditch. He dug a big hole and made a fire, and he wanted to throw the people in the fire. And the people who entered that fire, I mean, the Quran tells us that they were going to paradise. But obviously, if we did not read this in Quran, we would not know that. We would just know that people burned in a ditch. We would not know that Allah protected them and put them in paradise. And one verse in the Quran as well tells us about one woman. She was hesitant because she had a baby, and she was hesitant to jump into the fire. The baby told her and not to be afraid, and she jumped. So these stories, they aim to give us hope that even something that seems very bad in the beginning, for example, there's that big fire and people die in it, but the end result is that they've gone to paradise because they were believers. This was like a test for them. And we can also apply this to similar situations. Maybe we know people who've been in bad situations and difficult situations. We just look at the situation, but we don't look that Allah maybe is going to put them in the paradise because of this situation, because they went through that, because they had this suffering. Maybe this was their direct way to paradise. And paradise, we are told that you have whatever you want there, and you will not die there, and you will not suffer there. So if someone's gone through something for maybe a few minutes, and they've entered into this eternal state of having whatever they want, this is something. It is comforting to people, and I guess this also relates to the idea of fear of death, because I think most of us, we've had a fear of death at some point in our lives. But again, it goes back to the idea of purpose. If we know what happens after death, and we know that what is life and what is death and what will happen after death, we can prepare for these things, and it would take some of the fear away. And I think that the Islamic and religious understanding of death is very positive, whereas the atheist perspective of death is very negative. I mean, the atheist perspective of death is that you will just become turab, you will just become mud, dirt, and go into the ground, and that's it. That's the end. You just you become a rotten thing, and whatever you did in this life, however good, whatever you did, it's finished, and you just go into the ground, and that's the end of you. And that's why they can cremate people. They can put them in the fire after they die, because they think that that's the end. They won't feel anything anymore. And they will remember them. Maybe if they were a scientist, for example, they will talk about what they did, what they said. But for most people, it will not be that way. They will just be forgotten about, or just remembered by their families, and so forth. I find that the Islamic understanding of what happens after death is a lot more positive, because it's the time we hope for Allah. I mean, we hope that as a Muslim we will enter paradise, or any person who dies as a Muslim will enter paradise. And actually, the more difficult somebody had in this life, and certain types of situations where people die, we expect they will go to paradise. For example, they died from specific illnesses. There were specific illnesses where it said that someone will die as a martyr. Diseases of the stomach or different things like that, being killed unrighteously. We have the comfort that, okay, they had something bad happen in this life, but is actually going to lead them to something good. They're going to be in a better place. They're going to be now in comfort. Even though they suffered a bit, they will now be in comfort. So we have the reassurance that even if our not everything in our life was okay, that it will be made up for. Even I remember certain hadiths talking about, for example, a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and she asked him to make dua for her because she had illness. She was epileptic, and she said she used to fall and on the ground and have this epileptic fit. So she asked the Prophet ﷺ to make dua for her. But he gave her the choice that if you choose, if you like, I can make dua for you and you can be cured. But if you prefer, if you like, you can be patient and then you will go to paradise. This will be a reason for you to go to paradise if you are patient with this. And she chose to be patient, but she said that just make dua for me, because when I fall on the ground, when she had the epileptic fit, she said she became uncovered. So she was worried about her hijab. She was worried that people will see certain parts of her body that she's supposed to cover. So she asked the Prophet ﷺ to make dua that she will not become uncovered. So he made dua for her. But this is an example that we don't have to look down on people, and we don't also have to feel so sad if we feel we don't have enough in this life. If we have illnesses, these illnesses might be the reason why we enter paradise. So it goes back to the issue of purpose again, that we don't have suffering just for no reason. Sometimes the suffering that we have, the illness that we have, the thing that we didn't have in this life, maybe we will have it in the next life. We're told that the first people to enter paradise are the poor people. It doesn't mean that rich people will not enter as well, but rich people are going to be asked about their wealth. We think that having a lot of wealth is the most beneficial thing, but we'll be asked more about it. What did we do with it? And from where did we get it? And did we give zakat? Did we help the poor people? Poor people are not going to be asked these questions because they didn't have money. You don't have to pay zakat, and maybe people were just giving them money and paying for them, so they were not responsible for other people. People were responsible for them. So they will not have a lot of questions regarding money because they didn't have a lot of money. And so their entering paradise is a lot easier. So again, it's like the issue of purpose and so forth. When we know that there is a purpose, when we know that we're not just suffering, we're not being treated unjustly, and these things that we think are negative might be beneficial for us in the next life. This can be reassuring to us and help us with our mental health. When we feel that we're just suffering for no reason, that our loved ones have perished or they're suffering for no reason as well, this is very detrimental to our health, to our mental health, and to ourselves as well. If we think that things are not happening for a purpose, it's very difficult for us to understand. So I think the issue of how religion helps us to become mentally healthy is a big subject, but I think this is the main issue, the issue of purpose and the issue of there being Allah, knowing that Allah is there and knowing that Allah can support us and help us in all situations, and any situation we go through, He is there, and also there's a purpose for that. In this life, it can guide us and transform us into a better person if we accept that and if we choose that. Because if we don't accept that, it might change us into something worse sometimes, because some people just don't accept the things that happen to them, and they just turn away. but it can also benefit us in the next life as well, because we're waiting for that. I mean, all of us will enter into another realm, another life at some point. So that's the general thing. And obviously religion, and here I'm talking about Islam, our religion, Islam, also encourages us to be good to other people and to keep strong relationships with people. And this is another important issue if we want good mental health, because around the world in general now, there's the issue of mental problems, but also there's a general feeling of loneliness. I read that since 1979, before we were born maybe, until the present, it's gradually people are feeling more and more alone, and people don't have friendships as they did in the past. Many people nowadays don't have a close friend, and they don't have people to confide in, and many people just don't feel that they trust or get on with most people because, well, I don't know, for different reasons. The connections between people are not good, are not strong, and I actually feel very surprised when I actually read about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the companions, his relationship, for example, with Abu Bakr, even his relationship with his wife Khadija and so forth. We don't really see or witness these kind of relationships nowadays. People, they want to cut off their friendships and relationships for very small and insignificant things. The issue of putting other people first, or even just trying to put people on the same level and just trying to understand each other, is a problem in our time. But this is from the teachings of Islam, that putting other people first, or at least treating someone like yourself and trying to understand them, and maintaining relationships, maintaining friendships, and not just doing whatever you please. You know, our friendships, our relationships, they are important, and they are factors that will help us to stay healthy mentally, and to keep society healthy. When people feel alone and they feel that there's no one to support them, no one to help them, these are things that can affect us very negatively. So yeah, I think these are the most important things, and if anyone has any comments or suggestions about something, then please let us know. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.